Alright, let's get this little task at hand started here. First thing I'll do is get everything out of the way that I don't need here. Includes the stickers. The first thing I do is iron out these wrinkles. This covering the Brodak uses on the ARFs is total garbage. That's using medium heat. They tell you use a heat gun, and it's probably to keep this from ruining the sock on your iron. I managed to get it. I'll use a little bit of acetone or lacquer thinner. I'll get those red skid marks off. I'll just build a new rudder. When I do, I'll make it straight instead of having the offset on it, because there's enough offset in the warp in this fuselage where you won't need it in the friggin' rudder. So the sock is ruined, so I took it off. Naturally, I find that with medium heat, the covering with a bare iron is actually behaving better. It's the wrinkles are coming right out. And of course it's scratching the covering, which is why I had the sock on it. But at this point I don't give a shit. The wing isn't perfectly straight. It's got a little bow in it here on the trailing edge. There's no way in hell I'm going to get that ironed out. She's hurting for quality, I'll tell you that. I got a new rudder done, rudder and fin. Got some red covering. So I guess we're all set. Or I can even make that yellow like the rest of it maybe. And there's that in there tight. Get my drew a line across the bench. I use sealing towel because the pins stick in there pretty nice. And there. Get this out. And we'll scruff up where this has got to be glued, so the epoxy will actually stick to it. And when I get this done, we'll just the 45 caliber round ball for the revolvers and keep her nice and straight, and I'll just let her dry overnight. Don't mention in the instructions is to scruff this up, that wire up. If you don't scruff it up, epoxy is not going to stick to it. And once you do that, wipe it down, any finger oil and all that good stuff off. And I'm not going to touch that again. We'll glue this in. Try to get some epoxy. Mostly doing the get down in the hole there for the horn. Get it in there good. Now this wire is considerably smaller than what goes in there naturally. Just poke that stuff right to the bottom. You don't want to fill it, because when you push it in, you might actually hydraulic lock the thing. I've had that happen. The flaps are actually a little different. One side's got the little notch cut out here so your horn can fit in it. So you know, and know which end is up, more or less. And wiggle them in there. There. Now I clean my fingertips with alcohol, just so I wouldn't contaminate that metal bar wire horn. So I'll do the same with the other side, stick them together. I'll probably lay a piece of tape over this, and the epoxy will stay on the tape, and I'll bring it tight around the wire, and that'll allow the epoxy to build up a nice gusset on either side of that wire. There, the weight's holding her down. She's up against the line. Got the tape wrapped around the wire there, which has the epoxy trapped inside, and that'll make a nice epoxy gusset around that. It won't stick to this plastic, and I'll take a knife later when it's all hardened and just carefully cut into the epoxy and peel it off the plastic, and then it'll only be stuck good to the wood. That'll be that. So we'll leave that to dry for tonight and call it a day. Okay, I got the tape off. As you can see, the epoxy is not quite fully hardened yet, even though it did sit overnight. It just rolls off the smooth plastic. And you just take a knife and go along the edge and get that off. It helps when you rub a little oil on your fingertip and don't get it on the contact surface where you want the glue to actually stick, but just take a quick swipe over the plastic film and it'll just guarantee it won't stick. I didn't do it this time in this. I kind of forgot. A little bit annoyed at the quality of this airplane covering, but it's still coming off. Just rolling it off there. Okay, these tail feathers are set up for CA hinges. Geez, they got the slot split from arsehole to appetite here. So I'm gonna have to I'm gonna widen her out with this fella here. Pick that up. Because these blades are the width for the Dubros that I'm gonna replace the CAs with. What I'll do is I'll hold that kind of tight once I get it in there. But you can see the slots aren't even cut even. It's just, you know, like a 32nd of wood here. And it's almost gone through the fabric, or the film. None of them are, both ends are like that. So this is going to be a bit of a chore doing that. The stab is, you can see the hinge slots are all crooked. So what I'll do is get the corner of the blades on the edge that's best centered and try to slowly cut her in there and get that straight. But first I'm going to measure off where I want the hinges, because they're all over the place there. See how much luck we have with this now. We gotta try to straighten it and go in straight at the same time, and this is thin shit, man. Like that worked. have a nice easy to move surface. A little bit of a bulge here because that's so thin, but of course widening the cutout while I'm squeezing that. I did manage to get that to go in straight. That was a bit of a trick. And of course I'll take a little notch out of here to match what they got on the flap. So give you a tight joint. That was fun. Good thing epoxy's a gap filler. This thing was so crooked. As you can, I don't know, you can see this. There's quite opening on her there. But then again, these hinges are, even that slips in there pretty easy. I always scruff these things up. Get epoxy something to bite into. Okay, ready to mix up some epoxy and get this bugger together. After I sand these hinges up, and as you can see this one hasn't been sanded yet. After I sand them, I'll put a little oil, just a tiny little bit, so you see it wick into that pin, and you'll see it. It'll be quite clear when it hits that pin. I'll just give the hinge a couple of turns like that, and then right away I'll push it into a paper towel and then lay it on another one, and I'll leave it there until I'm ready to use it. So this paper towel will suck up any extra, and I usually have it folded like a butterfly. I'll do that, and then I'll flip it around and do the other side. Get the camera on it. Do the other side. And then I lay it here just in case, a slim chance that there's any that you didn't get. I use two separate ones because I don't want to keep laying them on the same paper towel, because if you do, you might contaminate the blade of the hinge here. So that's does a couple things. That lubes your hinge for you, but the biggest thing it does is it prevents the epoxy from sticking. So okay, all I do is scoop the epoxy up in the straw, pull it in a bit, and have any around the edges of the straw. It's a lot cleaner this way, and you're getting the glue right in there. And I'll push it into the back so I know where it's at, and then I'll come out about a quarter or a third of the way. You just squeeze it in. There. Injected epoxy hinges. And just to be neat and tidy, I always got the T of the pin facing out. Probably not necessary, but I always like to put a small film, just a tiny little thin film of epoxy on the hinge face itself. Not too much, just these. Then I'll trowel fit it, because these slots are huge, and I don't mind getting the epoxy that won't get into these extremely wide hinge gaps. And preferably you'll see a little bit of epoxy push out. God. There we go. I'm not really getting any squeeze. I'll pull the hinge out again and have a look. It's a little bit dry, so I'll just squeeze a little more in there. Again, these, usually what I put in there is enough, but yeah. Make it a little rambunctious. I always keep a paper towel soaked in alcohol kicking around while I'm doing this. That's better. I think I'm actually gonna, because it's so thin, I'd probably put a little clamp on that to make sure everything's together, because now when I squeeze it, you can see a little epoxy coming out, which is good, especially on the edges. Just pull out a little more, just wipe off the excess. It's not that huge of a deal because of the oil that's on that hinge. There. There. Here's one down. 4 more to go. I'm going to move quick because I'm using 12 minutes here. So, okay, the last thing I do is I get out a sanding rail or any other straight edge. Make sure all the hinges are straight and the protrusions are all the same. So I got one here, a little bit crooked. The rest of them look great. Well, like I say, normally I don't use clamps, but they get a little rambunctious with those hinge slots. So the clamps are actually bringing the wood nice and tight, and they're only light loaded clamps. Okay, while that's drying, I figured I'll get the wing fit. They're saying to use thin CA. Not a chance in hell you're going to use thin CA. I mean, that's quite a gap. That's very extreme. Yeah. More extra work. Took a 1/16 strip of balsa on both sides, top and bottom, to get that a little bit of sanding and stuff, to get that tightened up. And being careful not to throw the incidents off. I made sure it was exactly the same both sides, top and bottom. So now I can center this off and get the covering removed so we can epoxy the wing in place. There we go, success. So I will put a little V-notch in the trailing edge of the stabilizer, like where the hinge sets in. It'll set in and make that just a little bit tighter. But she's looking pretty good. There we have it. Went in there, a few little spots, pulled the glue out while it's still rubbery. Or even when it's hard, it comes out pretty easy because of the oil. So, got pretty nice moving hinges here. Far better than CA as far as I'm concerned. And as it gets used, they'll loosen up real nice. So at the point where, well, they're pretty much dropping on their own now. Yeah. Good stuff. Okay, I centered the fuselage, and usually I'll measure from the tip to the tips of the wings to get lined up, but this fuselage is warped. Fortunately, like I mentioned earlier, it's warped in the right direction, so at least it'll put tension in the lines. I can't get it to, I got it a little straighter, but that's as good as it gets. I'm not going to piss with it. I'm kind of at the point now where I'm polishing a turd here. So I just measured in from the outside edge of the ribs in. Got the center line. measured a 1/4 of an inch out to get my 1/2 inch, and use that a triangle on the fuselage to line it up, because the forward part of the fuselage is straight. The bow actually starts about, actually it starts at the end of the plywood, but whatever. It doesn't fly good, then I'll just chase a gopher with it. So I'm going to use 30-minute epoxy now to get this as good as I can, I suppose. Glue that bugger on. And I trimmed a little wide. Of course, I got that layer of balsa there. And I trimmed some of the covering off, just to give myself a little bit of a glue gusset around the edges there. Do the trick. And I prefer to use epoxy for a couple of reasons. One, big one is a good gap filler, and it gives you time. As CA, you better have it right, or else, unless you use the slow stuff. And what I'm going to do, so you don't get a big pile up, I'll walk this on. I'll just keep rocking it back and forth. Which will also get it in contact with the wood and the fuselage. Let's see, just kind of sucks it in there pretty good. And I'll keep her going. And I'll overlap a bit. So now I've gone about 1/4 of an inch too far. Better off using the stick in this instance. Put a bead on the other side. And this is kind of messy, but important to have a good glue joint. And I'll start walking it back, just like that. It didn't make that much of a mess. Actually, not too bad. It's fun working around this damn thing, I'll tell you. I got these little pieces of paper towel ripped up there, and I, as needed, I put some alcohol on it and start cleaning the excess epoxy off of that joint. I keep another one that's wet with alcohol. Yeah, that's why I keep my fingers clean of it. Okay, you get the wing glued on, and of course there's always a little gap in there, buggers. So while the epoxy was still tacky, I put some more in there, so I'm still getting a chemical bond while that's still tacky. You can see the covering, it's going to leave a little ugly gap, but having the glue on the covering is not going to be a very strong joint. Having the glue on the wood is. So instructions tell you to kind of leave a little bit of an underlap, so you're actually gluing on the covering, which is going to make a weaker joint. I already lined up and marked out the stabilizer string from tip to the fin tip here. Make sure it's lined up. It's centered at the point of the stabilizer, but it's off center back here, of course, because of the warp. So what I'm going to probably do is just put the fin on straight, which will give it a little bit of offset. Normally I don't put offset in these. So I'm going to glue those hinges in with the straw technique as before, and get this sucker done. I got this, the nose up, tail down. I'm putting the epoxy in this way because it's not a solid trailing edge. It's two sheets coming together. And because of that, epoxy is just going to run down the sheet instead of staying in a trapped slot like you would the other one. So I'm going to squeeze that in there. As per normal. Because I want the epoxy to stay put, I'm going to keep it facing this way, so the epoxy, instead of running away from the hinge, is going to run into the hinge. And it just dawned on me I used 12 minutes, so I got to get my butt in gear here instead of 30. Alright, just to make sure everything is good, don't want any twists. Got the old Robert incidence gauge on here, so that one is zeroed. Here's why I use these things. Never used them on control lines till my stunt instructor showed me. It'd be a good idea to do this in control lines as well. I'll wait for that damn thing to autofocus. There we go. She is -2. So we get a twist in the wing. It's tweaked in the wrong direction too for control line. Well, you want it straight. So I'm going to get the iron out and we'll get that out of there. Okay. We'll call that good. Had to iron the tweak of the right side. The left side's pretty good, so we're good to put the ailerons or the flaps on. I went ahead and glued the stab on as well, and built a new rudder for it as part of the original. Got the green running this way on the fin, the vertical green on the rudder, which will keep the whole thing stiff. Except I built it flat. Now this has got to go on here. I'll put a little offset in here, I think. Not a lot. Beautiful. Now it says to use CA. I don't believe in CA when it comes to gluing flight surfaces on. Epoxied the stab on. I got a triangle made up here that'll go underneath just to beef it up a little more. Wings epoxied in, vertical fin rudders epoxied in. Okay, there we have it. One finished clown. I got a 3200 milliamp battery. It's a 25C, so hopefully that'll work. To get to get up there on 30-35C, they won't fit in there. As it is, I had to sand away a bit on the spur, which I really don't like doing, because this is a real weak spot in the wing here. So that'll fit. I got my Ram Tech motor in there. Probably a little overkill, as I've been told, but all I know is it's a 25 equivalent. So we got this. This is the little E-Flight control line. It's kind of like a start-stop timer throttle assembly. I put a Castle's, I think it's a Castle's creation, 36 amp electronic speed controller in it. Got this hooked up. I already ran the motor. It runs good. I got a I think that's a 9.5 or 9.6. I think it's a 9.6 prop. That's all I could find. Again, what they recommend is nowhere to be found in the Edmonton area anyway. And I had to solder on a Dean's connector here for the battery. So this one will fit, and this 2500 will fit. So I put the Velcro on the end. It comes with Velcro on the inside of this plate, this wooden piece they put in here. So, oh, and I got a Dubro electric spinner on it with a 4mm adapter. So I do a little bit of shaving to get that to work. And if I need any nose weight, I'd say maybe just a smidgen aft on the CG with the battery in it. Not much. So just kind of teetering there. If I didn't need a little extra, I'd just put a standard Dubro spinner on it, because they're a little heavier. So that's it. One Brodak pain in the butt Super Clown. It's not a bad looking airplane. It's kind of fugly there. Probably not a whole lot worse, I guess, than a gas tank and engine sticking out. But flying and looking at her from the pilot side, she's a nice clean looking airplane. I didn't bother putting this thing on. I just couldn't wrap my head around why you would do that. Adding weight and drag and blocking the motor from any cooling it might get. So I didn't bother with that. They don't give any reason for it being there, so I didn't put it on. Simple as that. Then one Brodak electric Super Clown. Next video we'll be flying it. Hopefully it'll hopefully it's not beyond my abilities to fly.